It's time to make an everyday carry bowl. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today I'm going to make an everyday carry bowl. Now, if you're like me, when you heard that term first, you probably said, wait, what did you say? Everyday carry. Okay, and what that basically means, it's a fancy term for all the stuff that's in your pockets. That's your everyday carry, the stuff you carry every day. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a bowl that will hold your everyday carry items. That way you can keep everything in one spot so things aren't getting lost and disorganized. You keep this on your dresser, your nightstand, or maybe a table by the door before you head out, and you can drop everything in it when you get home, and you know where everything is when you come get ready to head out. You can just drop it in your pockets and go. So it's a way of making life a little bit more organized. And I have a brother that has asked for one of these, so I'm going to go ahead and make this for him, and I'm going to make another one for my other brother. Yeah, I've got two brothers, so I'm going to be making two of these simultaneously. I've got this beautiful slab of pecan. This is quarter sawn. This is the pith area, or the pith area was right about in here. This is a very big log, and this is coming about 90 degrees off of the pith area, and that's how you know it's quarter sawn. We're going to make two slabs out of this. I'm going to head over to the bandsaw and get these cut out, so let's go ahead and get started. Actually, before we get started, I'm going to lay out some of my everyday carry items, and I'm going to take a quick measurement. The space these will need is about 8 inches or about 20 centimeters is what I'm guessing. So about an 8-inch bowl should do the trick to hold everything. So I'm going to use my 8-inch template, and these are just simple measured and cut out pieces of cardboard that I keep on hand at all different diameters. And this blank has a little bit of a crack on one end of it, so I want to stay on this end of that blank. Remember when using the bandsaw that you have a really good flat surface contacting the table of the bandsaw. That downforce, if you don't have a flat base on the wood, it's going to vibrate and bounce around and you can cause some damage. Just take your time. I keep the pivot point off to the side of the bandsaw at about a 90-degree angle, as you see there, and I rotate the blank around that pivot point, keeping my hand away from that blade. I try to keep about a 5-inch distance from that blade at all times. Okay, so there's our blank. Now we'll head back over to the lathe and get started. I left a small portion of the sapwood on this blank. I like doing that as a design feature. It makes a nice contrast against the heartwood. The heartwood is the darker wood that's in the center of the log, and the sapwood is the newer or younger wood that's on the outside. Now, the only time that you wouldn't want to do that is if you have really wet wood. And the reason for that is the sapwood will shrink differently at a different rate than the heartwood. So you're probably going to get cracks in the sapwood. This wood has sat around for almost a year, so it's pretty stable. Now here I'm basically loosening the tailstock and moving the piece around until I get the rim side balanced. Now the back side, this will be the bottom of the bowl. It's not balanced, but that's not a big problem. I'm going to level that off right here. I'm using my 5/8-inch swept back bowl gouge, and I'm going to make some cuts from left to right, pointing the tip of the bowl gouge towards the direction of the cut. And I'm going to level off this face of the bowl blank. The key here is because the wood is uneven, if I put any pressure into the wood, it's going to vibrate the tool like crazy. Instead, I'm applying pressure down into the tool rest and gliding the tool across the tool rest and allowing it enough time to cut the high spots. Just want to go slow and a nice even pace and allow the wood to be cut instead of trying to force the tool into the wood. We just need a simple level surface here to start the tenon and the base of the bowl. And while I'm at it, I'm going to level off the sides as well because they're a little wonky. I'm making a pass from left to right. Same concept. I'm using a lot of down pressure into the tool rest. So when the high spots come over, they don't bounce into the tool and cause it to vibrate. You want to remember to tighten up the tailstock as you work with this. Now I've sped the lathe up a little more. The more balanced the blank becomes, the faster you can go, or the faster you can turn the piece within reason. There should be no vibration at all in the lathe or in the tool or in the bull blank. If you're feeling vibration, or if the tool rest is vibrating, or you feel any motion like that, you're going too fast. You need to step it back a bit and slow the lathe down. Nice, easy push cuts across the tool rest. Now I'm going to level off the rim of the bowl. This will be the top section of the bowl. I'm just using the bottom wing to lightly scrape off the high spots of that rim so I get a sense of where the rim is going to be. You can see how I was just using the bottom side. This is still the 5/8 inch bowl gouge. This is my larger bowl gouge I use for roughing and removing large amounts of material. I'll use my 1/2 inch bowl gouge when I get into a little more refined work. I'm going to scribe where the tailstock, or the tenon will be rather. Now here's my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. And I'll remove material from left to right to reveal the tenon and then the shoulder. So this wood is pecan. I harvested it about a year ago, so it's not green wood, but it's also not perfectly dry. It's kind of in a nice sweet spot. Did you see that kickback there? That kickback can be avoided. I've got a video all about that. You might want to check that out. That can be a real source of frustration if you're getting a lot of kickbacks, and there's an easy way to fix that. So check out that video after this one. But this wood is in a really nice state. It's not wet and green, but it's also not dry and hard as a rock. So it turns really well, and I'm going to have pretty good stability afterwards. It's probably not going to move much, meaning it's not going to shrink or distort too much after the piece is turned. It's probably going to change shape a little bit, but not to the point where it'll be that noticeable. You can turn wood in any state, whether it's sopping wet green wood or if it's bone dry and hasn't been wet for years, you can still turn it. There's just different characteristics to each of those woods. And I actually have a new course called Tree to Bowl, Understanding Greenwood. And if you want to check that out, there's some great information. If you're into harvesting your own timber to turn, you're going to want this course because there's a ton of information in there of how to process the wood properly so it'll last, you can store it well, and you're not going to get cracks. And then what to do with it after you've turned a bowl. We cover all of the angles of dealing with the wood for turning bowls. So I'm working on the shape of the exterior of the bowl here. I'm doing some pull cuts. We need to clean up that area that's right next to the shoulder, and that's going to become the foot. Now the foot on this bowl is a little bigger than I typically like, but the reason for that is this bowl is relatively wide and shallow, and it's intended to have different objects in it of different weight. So if we have, for instance, if everything got dumped on one side of this bowl and it had this delicate base to it, it might tip over very easily. So we don't want that. So instead we're going to have a really nice sturdy base on this. There's a little bit of high spots and uneven spots, so I'm using the shear scrape here to smooth off these areas. I've got a video all about shear scraping. It's a great technique to use to make a really nice finished surface without doing any sanding. I'll still need to sand this, but it's just going to be relatively smooth starting off, which makes things a lot easier when it comes to sanding. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I need to go ahead and finish up this little area right next to the shoulder. There's a little bit of a high spot there. I need to clean that out. You can see I'm just using the bottom wing of the tool here and just lightly shaving. Think of this more of shaving versus cutting. Technically, this is a scraping cut, but because we're using the different angles, it's occurring so lightly that it's like shaving. All right, now I'm going to use my 3/8 inch spindle detail gouge. Now, a question that I'm often asked is, why is it called a detail spindle gouge? Well, it's essentially a detail spindle gouge because it has a little bit longer point, and that longer point allows me to reach down into the bottom of this bevel for the dovetail angle of the tenon. And I want to make sure that inside edge is cleaned out really well. Any debris in there will make this not seat properly in the 4-jaw chuck. Please do me a favor and click that like button. The reason is YouTube looks at how many people like videos, and when they see a lot of likes, they help spread the video out to more people. It helps the channel, it helps everything out. I greatly appreciate your help. Thank you. So I'm going to pop out the spur drive center, and I'll attach the 4-jaw chuck. And I've got a little bit of dust in there. I'm going to blow that out of there. Again, you really want to make sure there's nothing in that bottom corner for the dovetails to interfere with the dovetails. All right, that's looking pretty good. First thing I want to do when I have this reversed is I want to establish the rim. Typically the rim will be slightly angled in towards the bowl. That's the way I like to do it. There's a variety of different ways you can shape the rim. Then I like to clear away material around the inside wall to create and establish the wall thickness. I call this like a ditch area that I create here. Then I'll actually work backwards. I will, from what a lot of people will do, I'll actually then clear away some of the center material. Many people like to clear the center out first. Now the reason I go from the outside in is I'm able to compare the inside shape that I'm creating with the outside wall shape much easier. If I start in the middle and just scoop out material until I get to the outside, I'm kind of guessing where that outside shape is. By working down the interior wall, I'm matching that shape up as I go. Here you can see I've gone in maybe 1.5 inches or just a little ways down in there, and I can pick up where I left off and make a pass right down through those sections. Now with a thinner walled bowl, that center core creates a lot of stability and reduces the amount of vibration in that wall. This bowl is not as thin as some other bowls, so I'm not really concerned with it vibrating much. But it's just going to be that much more stable with that centerpiece in there. And then once I create that wall to that point, I don't go back up that wall at all. I'm noticing that my cut is becoming a little bit more difficult and I'm not getting quite as clean of a cut, so I'm going to go back and sharpen my bowl gouge. Sharpening is really not that big of a deal. You want to make sure you've got tools shaped the way you want and a system set up where you can sharpen your bowl gouge quickly and easily. I have a course all about tool sharpening. You might want to check it out if you're having any kind of difficulty maintaining sharp tools. And that's it. The tool's sharp, and I'm going to get a nice clean cut now because of that. So I'm going to go back down here one more time and clean up that last cut because I was getting a little bit of drag, and I know that I was burnishing the surface a little bit. You can see the shavings coming out are much cleaner now that I've just sharpened the tool. And the pass is much, much better. Look at those nice crisp shavings. When you have a dull tool, you're going to have a lot more dust and smaller pieces because it's just ripping fibers off. When your tool is nice and sharp, you're going to get a clean cut and you're going to have crisp shavings like that. Some people think too that if you have to go back and sharpen a few times, that something might be wrong with the tool or your technique, and that it really has to do with the hardness of the wood. If you're finding that the tool is dulling and it's not cutting as well as it was before, then you need to sharpen it. And many of the hardwoods require sharpening several times during a turning. So as long as you're getting good clean surfaces the way you want, there's nothing wrong with going and sharpening 3, 4, 5, 6 times during a turning of a single bowl. Now the inside bottom of this, we want that to be curved. This is a relatively wide, almost flat bowl, but I still want the bottom of that bowl to be concave. I do not want it to be perfectly flat across the bottom. I want it to go downward into a concave, very subtle curve. So I'm going to match up where I'm cutting with the previous shape. And I'm using really light passes here, just letting the bevel rub, picking up the cut. You can see how thin that cut is. Also, look how crisp the shavings are. We just want to sneak up on that final shape. I know this material needs to be moved out of the way, so we'll move it, but now I'm right about where I need to be, so I'm going to make very light passes. Less than 1 millimeter of material is being removed. And you want to go very slow into the very center there. You don't want to rip out fibers. That's looking pretty good. All right, so now it's time to sand. I'm sanding using the right side of the pad. It appears as if maybe that whole pad is engaged on the wood, but it's really not. It's the bottom edge and the right side when I'm inside the bowl. And I never sand the center with the bowl rotating. And you can learn all about that by watching my sanding video. You can check that out. I'll put a link up above for that. I'm going to ease the edges of that bowl just a little bit so it's not real sharp. My brothers are very delicate. I don't want them to get hurt. Now you can sand with the lathe running, but you need to be aware of something. You're going across grain fibers in certain areas of that bowl at a 45 or at a 90-degree angle. So right there, we're going across those fibers at a 90-degree angle, and we're creating new scratches. The way you get rid of those is to stop the lathe and focus on just those scratched areas and remove them, just using the edge of the pad in line with the wood grain. And again, this is all covered in that sanding video. Be sure to check that out after this one. I'm going through all my grits. I started at 120 grit, and then I moved to 180, then I went to 240, and then 320. If you notice what's happening, I'm increasing by increments of 50%. Each new grit is removing the scratch marks from the previous grit. You just take your time. It's actually not too bad. It can be done pretty quickly. I don't enjoy sanding, but I can also do it a little bit quicker. I'm not trying to make something museum quality here, but I can get a really nice finish in a relatively short period of time. Okay, so now I need to remove the base. I'm going to use a jam chuck. This is a simple jam chuck that I've created. That's going to support the bowl from the inside. And I'll have a piece of packing foam there to protect the inside of the bowl. And I'll pull the tailstock up and just merge it right back to the original pinhole that we used from the very beginning. That way we know it'll be centered. You want to get the tool rest right in there where it's going to support the cut, and you want to make sure that tool rest height is at the right height so that the cut is perfectly centered. I'm using push cuts in towards the headstock to remove the tenon. And I'm going to true up the foot of this, just a really light cut there. I don't want to remove much material at all. And then I'll go slightly concave. I need the inside portion of this base to be shallower than the feet. And I'm using the bowl gouge here to check that. They're almost the same depth, so I need that middle to be just a little bit more recessed. Make a very light pass here. This is also another good time to sharpen your tool. Now I'm going to use a backwards cut. I'm only using the bottom part of the left wing to shape the inside of this foot. You want to go very slow here and make a very light cut. Now this is a completely open cut. This is very delicate, and you want to make sure this is a very light pass that you do. You don't want to make a big aggressive cut like that because you will get a catch. Just go very slow. And again, a very small amount of material being removed there. What I'm doing is I'm continuing the curve of the bottom of the bowl through the foot. I'm going to check one more time to make sure that's recessed enough, and it is. Something that's important right here is you do not want to tighten the tailstock anymore because this material is so reduced. If you tighten it, you can smash those fibers. So again, I'm going to use my spindle detail gouge, and I'm going to round off the base of the bowl right to the center. Then I'm going to take the nub and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I've also reduced the speed a bit here too. Then I'll make a final pass right into the bottom of the nub, push with a little pressure and turn the lathe off and cut through those fibers. And I'll turn it by hand as well to cut through those fibers. Didn't quite get it off, but it'll come off pretty easily. So the nub, you just break that off, and using the side of the sanding pad, I'll sand off that nub area. You want to rotate the bowl around back and forth. That's way you don't end up making a little rut on one side or the other. I found that if you sand a bit on one side and then flip it around to sand from the other side, you have a much better chance of having a relatively smooth bottom versus having a little bit of a hole there. Okay, I'm going to use my wood burning tool to go ahead and sine the bottom of the bowl. I use a chisel tip. I find it works well for the way I like to sign. It's not the easiest, it's not really designed for doing lettering, but I kind of like it actually. I'll put links to these and all the tools I've used for this video down in the description, so check those out. Okay, I'm going to use tried and true oil. An oil finish on this is going to be more durable than anything else, and it'll be able to withstand all of the abuse that this bowl is going to take from having things dropped into it every day. This is tried and true original. This is beeswax and linseed oil, and I do not make this myself. I get lots of people think that I make this. I do not make this myself. Now, the reason you're seeing that jar, which maybe makes it appear homemade, is because I purchased this in a 1-gallon can, and instead of using that big can every time I need to use the oil, I transfer it into a small jar. That keeps me from opening the large can too often, and it keeps the oxygen out of that can as well. So that large can will last a very long time. These small jars will last for a month or so. It only takes a very little bit. I don't know if you saw, but I put just a little bit on that cloth applicator, and that's enough to cover this entire bowl. If you can see the finish on the wood, you have enough finish on that area. You do not put this on thick at all. It's just enough to coat the surface. There you can see that sapwood against the heartwood and the contrast that makes. I think I like this. It's a simple bowl. It's a really good project. If you're looking for a simple project to start off or to create, this is a good way to go. And it's a nice, usable, functional bowl that you can see every day. Look at those wood grains. Pecan is such a beautiful wood to turn. Just a hint of pink and red color between the sap and heartwood. Just really, really, really gorgeous wood. So here we have it, an everyday carry bowl. Now this is a little different than I usually turn. I usually like to have a nice small trim base on the bowls, and a bowl of this size I'd probably turn a little bit thinner. But the reason for that is this bowl and the base is going to be, there'll be things sitting in it off-centered, and we want a good sturdy base on it so it's not tipping over. Also, it needs to be a little bit durable. Things are probably just going to get chucked into it, like keys and that. Also, the finish I use, the oil, is designed for that too. Keys hitting it and things like that. If I used lacquer or a film coating like a polyurethane, there's a good chance that's going to get scratched with the keys. So an oil finish will allow you to come back and sand it a little bit and then put more oil on it with no troubles whatsoever. Redoing the other finish is a little bit more complicated. So all in all, it's a fun little project. I hope my brothers like these. I've got one done right now. I'm going to go get the other one started, and we'll see how they like them. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do me a huge favor and click that like button below the screen and make sure you're subscribing. I've got tons of videos. And if you're remotely interested in turning bowls in any way, shape, or form, whether you're just getting started or you've been turning for a long time, be sure to check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Yes, turnawoodbowl.com. And as always, until next time, happy turning.